Hello, welcome everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is our 63rd meeting, coming off a very important meeting last week on the anniversary of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. We had a very wonderful breakthrough discussion with 550 people from 50 different nations across the globe. This was a very intense meeting. And I think going off of that into this meeting today, where the danger of nuclear war has gotten even stronger, if you can believe that. It's gotten even more intense. We're going to bring a lot of different people together today to discuss this. I'd like to open it up for Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Please go ahead, Helga.
Hello. Let me greet all of you. Today is a very special event because the escalation to, a dynamic which can only, if continued on this trajectory, lead to a catastrophe, possible nuclear war, is combined with a clear effort to silence all people who speak out against it and blame them to be Putin agents, Chinese agents. And I find this an insult to my intelligence and to, most other people's intelligence, because if you cannot comment on, your absolutely well-founded concern that a certain policy is one of confrontation, doesn't leave room for negotiation and diplomacy, and if you cannot articulate that you oppose that for moral reasons, for objective reasons, then then we are obviously no longer in a world of democracy. Now, as you will see shortly after my comments, we will have Scott Ritter speaking about the raid which occurred in his home, which does fit this category. And I come back to that in a second, but the concern is that of an escalation step by step, closer to a point of no return. Now, the recent news coming from various newspaper outlets that in the United States there is now an active discussion, already maybe a decision, to deploy the joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, the so-called JASSMs, which will enable, once they are delivered to Ukraine, Ukraine jets can launch 2,400-pound missiles that in turn can carry 1,000-pound warheads with a range of almost 1,000 kilometers, very high accuracy and enhanced lethality. So this so far has been a technology which only was shared with very close allies, and various allies have ordered such systems, but to give them to Ukraine is supposed not to, enable the Ukrainians with such technology, but to also influence the German decision that they should make available the Taurus cruise missile, which is has been refused by Germany so far because they feared this would escalate the situation, to possible World War III. Now, Germany very recently already allowed the Ukrainians to use long-range missiles in the Kursk operation. And, that, again, is not something, which just was made up by the Ukrainians, which is what is being said. But I think it is very clear that the entering of Russian territory in the Kursk region would not have been possible without technological advice by NATO. The decision was in all likelihood made by NATO. And this is ending essentially for probably a very long time the option of a diplomatic solution. At least this was the estimate of Polyansky, the Russian deputy head in the United Nations, who basically said, Putin made a very generous offer on June 14th when he offered a Eurasian security architecture, and in that context offered a negotiated solution for the Ukraine conflict. So that is off the table now. And, as we saw, the murder of Hamas leader Hania also basically, I think, destroyed the option of a negotiated solution for the Gaza situation, pending what comes out of the discussions today involving Qatar and Egypt and so forth. So we are on a trajectory to war. There is a renewed, almost drumbeat discussion in Germany about the operational plan Germany, which is being described as, the absolute effort to make Germany war ready, to plan to have soon 800,000 soldiers transported in fast speed to the eastern border, including equipment, preparing to transport a large amount of wounded and prisoners of wars and refugees from the Baltics and Poland, to integrate the medical system into this epochal change Scholz was talking about, basically educating the population that in the case of the coming war with Russia, that wounded soldiers will have a priority over normal patients. I mean, I could give you many more examples, but the drumbeat, the effort to try to convince people that the war is inevitable with Russia, latest by 2029, why it should be in 2029 is a mute. But we have to somehow get off this trajectory, or else it will be too late at one point. Now, I want to say 2 days ago, we had the 15th of August, and that was the 53rd anniversary of a very fateful announcement by President Nixon, who on that date in 71 basically ended the Bretton Woods system and declared, the dollar would be moved off the gold standard, and the floating exchange rate would replace the fixed exchange rates, and price and wage controls, which basically translated into vicious austerity, would be announced. Now, my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, was the only economist we are aware of who absolutely said, if you continue on that course, which was the shift to go in the direction of profit maximization and abandon sound investment in physical economy, it would lead to a situation of a new depression, a new danger of fascism, a new world war, unless you would go for a completely different economic system. Now, Mr. LaRouche was, a thorn in the flesh of the Anglo-American establishment, because he not only recognized what that shift meant, but for the following 40 plus years, he at every turn of the financial system, put his finger in the wound whenever it went more in the direction of deregulation of the markets, more profit, more, favoring a small establishment elite on the top, and offering at the same time alternatives. Now, that was the real reason why, when he was becoming successful, both in advising President Reagan with the Strategic Defense Initiative, and then when his political movement started to have electoral successes in '86, that, the decision was made to make a raid against our home on the 6th of October, '86, when 400 FBI agents surrounded our home, and as we found out later, they had an order to kill if things would basically escalate, which was the intention. So I'm saying that what happened to my husband, or to us, we fortunately survived it. was a foreboding of what is happening now to a lot of people. And one can apply the Bonhoeffer famous quote, if they first come for the gypsies, then they come for the social democrats, and then they come for me, but then there were the Jews, and then for me, and then there was nobody left to defend me. If people would have defended what happened against my late husband, we probably would not have come where we are today. So having that in mind, and what is at stake, where, it would be so easy for the world to get out of this crisis by, basically going back to an American foreign policy, which was associated with the founding fathers, with John Quincy Adams, who said, the purpose of the United States is not to go abroad and chase foreign monsters, but, to form an alliance with absolute sovereign republics and work together. This policy could be revived today very, very easily. So I think that, we will hear now from all the unfolding crises today, but also about the existence of a new system. And if we could convince enough people in the United States to stop this geopolitical confrontation and the effort to keep hegemony, which is not possible anyway anymore because a multipolar world has already developed, it would be very easy to go in the direction of forming a new paradigm. And I want to say that, the BRICS Plus offers cooperation with anybody. And I think we need to explore a real solution to the crisis, which, would mean a solution to the financial crisis. It would mean giving up geopolitics and replacing it with a cooperation among in the principles of peaceful coexistence. So let's enter a dialogue with the idea that, we have maybe only a very short period of time, to avoid a course which is extremely, extremely far advanced on the road to disaster. So that's all I wanted to tell you in the beginning.
Thank you, Ms. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, for that important overview. Just want to inform people that we do have 350 people on nearly. Thank you all for joining us, new people especially. We are receiving some harassment, and the email that was sent out is no longer working. So if you have a friend who's trying to get on, please forward them the link to get on this meeting. Just letting you know that. But I think that's very telling of the outline that we presented here today and the people we have on, that we would receive harassment to try to prevent this dialogue from happening. So with that, I'd like to have a very good friend of Helga Zepp-LaRouche in our organization, Scott Ritter, who's a former UN weapons inspector and a former US Marine Intelligence officer. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Helga. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Diane, Jose, and everybody else who invited me to be a participant in this forum. I just want to make sure that I'm being heard. And okay.
Yes.
Look, as Helga said, we live in very dangerous times right now. I personally believe that we are confronting one of the greatest existential threats to the continued existence of humanity in terms of the looming threat of nuclear conflict between the United States and Russia. We now also have a similar situation brewing in the Middle East, where there is potential of a greater conflict between Israel and its neighboring states, including Iran, that could potentially go nuclear as well. Once the nuclear genie is out of the bottle, it will be devastating for everybody. There's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. Once nuclear weapons become mainstreamed into war fighting capabilities, they will be used until there's nobody left on the planet to either use them or be targeted by them. This is an extraordinarily dangerous situation. I've been speaking out about the threat of nuclear war for some time. Just quick bio. I was the first. I'm very proud of this fact. I was the first weapons inspector implementing the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty on the soil of the Soviet Union. I was the first person to arrive because I arrived 2 weeks earlier as part of an advance team. And when the treaty went into, it entered into force on the morning of July 1st, I happened to be in country. So I was the first. While the others were flying in, I was already there. But those bragging rights aside, I was part of an effort that got rid of, for the first time in history, an entire category of nuclear armed weapons, intermediate range missiles, cruise missiles. And we made the world safer. And we began a process there of verified arms control that didn't seek to limit the growth of nuclear arsenals, but to reduce them in their size, hopefully to the point where all nuclear weapons would be eliminated. That was the path that we were on. Today, we're not on that path. We're on a completely different trajectory where arms control is not only in the history books, but it's openly mocked, reviled. Those who purport to embrace arms control are demonized and vilified. Peace is no longer in vogue. War is in vogue, and that's of course in keeping with the what America has become, that which Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address in 1961, a nation where democracy has been corrupted by a permanent military-industrial complex that is wedded with the United States Congress. We are a nation addicted to war. Our economy requires war. So in order for America to exist, to continue to exist, we must be constantly in search of conflicts that feed the military-industrial complex. And if you speak out against this, you are then targeted as the enemy. I have been targeted as an enemy of the United States. Last week, my home was raided, and not by 400 special agents, but by over 20. An unpleasant experience, to say the least. My crime is no crime at all. It's they've accused me of failure to register as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. Why haven't I registered as a foreign agent? Because I am not a foreign agent. I am a journalist. I am a member of the press. I am a loyal American. I work for myself, and my duties and loyalties are to the United States of America exclusively. I'm somebody who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I will say this with all the certainty I can muster. Those who raided my house last week are enemies of the Constitution of the United States of America. They were operating in violation of my constitutional rights, seeking to suppress free speech and seeking to suppress a free press. What are they afraid of? They're afraid of the fact that I'm calling out the government on the lies that they are telling about the conflict in Ukraine. They're afraid that I'm calling them out for the lies they are disseminating about Russia itself, feeding the disease of Russophobia that is designed to cloud the minds of the American people so that the people cannot discern for themselves, whether or not Russia is a threat. Anybody who breaks from the official narrative is deemed to be an enemy, a foreign agent. This is a very dangerous, mode of operations that the Justice Department and the FBI are trying to impose on us. I remind people that free speech is just that, free speech. There can be virtually no limitations to it. Yes, you cannot jump up in a crowded theater and shout fire, but you can call out the government for bad policy. In fact, it is the duty and responsibility of American citizens and a free press to do just that. In 1971, the United States government sought to suppress the publication of the Pentagon Papers, leaked by Daniel Ellsberg, a very brave former civil servant, American patriot, who realized that the American people were being lied to about Vietnam, how we got there and why we continue to be there. So he leaked the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and the Nixon administration sought to prevent their publication. And the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision determined that the United States government had no right to suppress the publication because of free speech, because of the First Amendment guarantees regarding a free press. Justice Hugo Black, on the Supreme Court at that time, wrote a concurring opinion. And one of the things he said is it's paramount among the responsibilities of a free press or paramount among the responsibilities of free press, is the duty to prevent any part of the government from deceiving the people and sending them off to distant lands to die of foreign fevers and foreign shot and shell. It is the duty to prevent any part of the government from deceiving the people. We do understand, of course, that the US government today, the Biden administration, has openly acknowledged that they selectively declassify intelligence information that they know is wrong, that they know is not complete, for the purpose of disseminating it to the American people to shape the debate. The American people are being deceived by the government about a conflict in Ukraine that, because of this deception, blinds the American people to the dangers and could lead to nuclear war. Therefore, it is the duty of a free press to speak out. And that's what I do. And that's what others do. And now they're trying to silence us. So I would just ask that everybody be awake to what's happening here. As Helga said, had people rallied around Lyndon LaRouche when his home was raided, maybe these excesses wouldn't be taking place today. There's a lot of people out there that don't like me. I don't care. I really don't. I don't wake up in the morning and wonder about how people like me or not. I didn't take an oath to be your friend. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution is under attack, a frontal assault on the Constitution. And what they are doing to me, they're doing to everybody. If the Justice Department and the FBI are allowed to criminalize a free press, then the First Amendment is dead. And with it, the Constitution, and with it, the constitutional republic we call the United States of America. This is an issue of the existential survival of the United States of America, and it's incumbent upon everybody to rally around the cause, not of defending Scott Ritter, but defending a free press. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, and totally agree with you. This is about actually defending, truth here. And if people don't rally around what's truthful, then it's going to happen to you. And I want to thank you again for your bravery and for being on with us today. I am going to ask Dennis Small, who's going to bring a video up, which he's going to present on what happened to Lyndon LaRouche with Ramsey Clark. Do I have you there, Dennis Small?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
So thank you very much. The FBI's raid on Scott Ritter and more people, according to today's news, was hardly the first rodeo for the FBI. Helga mentioned a 400-person team of FBI agents, other federal agents, state police, and so on, raided the home that she and Lyndon had in Northern Virginia back in 1986. And the only reason that the federal marshals, who had been given instructions to shoot to kill if necessary, and there is documentation of this, that did not come to pass is because of timely memos and messages urgently gotten to President Reagan at the time. The LaRouche and a number of associates were, however, tried later for crimes that they never committed at the Alexandria rocket docket. I was one of those 7 tried in Alexandria. Lyndon LaRouche was given a sentence of 15 years, of which he served 5. Other members of our movement spent 10 years in jail for crimes that they never committed. Just as Scott's so-called crime was to use his First Amendment rights and his capabilities as a journalist to tell the truth as he sees it about the danger of nuclear war, Lyndon LaRouche's crime, so-called, was that, but in addition to that, his incredible prescience on the issue of the global strategic crisis around the financial system, the famous August 15th, 1971 date that Helga referred to. We know this, and we have this documented, that was in fact the instrumental cause behind the attack on LaRouche and the rest of us. In 1982, as the world financial system was crumbling, and Lyndon LaRouche was speaking with Mexican President Jose López Portillo and others about options to the breakdown crisis, which we're now seeing in its full glory today, Henry Kissinger wrote a memo, a personal letter to the director of the FBI, William Webster. We know it as the Dear Bill letter, in which he tells him, would you please open an investigation of Lyndon LaRouche? That he did. There's much to be said about this. I will turn you over now to a video presentation, which was made after Lyndon LaRouche was released from prison. This was a meeting on August 31st and September 1st, 1995 in Vienna, Virginia, of an international tribunal on the Justice Department's misconduct. You will hear now brief excerpts of Mr. LaRouche's testimony as to the causes behind, or one of the major causes behind, the attack on us. And you will also hear Ramsey Clark, who is the former Attorney General of the United States under Lyndon Johnson, and who was Mr. LaRouche's attorney on appeal. If we could have the video now, please.
In 1982-83, there were two things which greatly excited my enemies. Number one, I had been involved in 1982 in presenting a proposal which is based on my forecast in the spring of 1982 that a major debt crisis would break out in South America, Central America, and the expectation that Mexico would be the nation that would have a debt crisis. I've been involved with many of these countries and personalities in them in projecting alternatives to this kind of inequitable system where colonial nation had been replaced as a term by debtor nation. And the debt of South America, Central America was largely illegitimate, that it was a debt which had not been incurred for value received, but had been done under special monetary conditions under the so-called floating exchange rate system, where somebody would come, bankers would come to a country, the IMF in particular, and say, we just wrote down the value of the currency. We're now going to refund your financing of your foreign debt, which you can no longer pay on the same basis as before. So I propose that the debt crisis be used as the occasion for united action by a number of governments of South and Central American countries to force a reform in the international debt relations and to force a reform within international monetary relations. This report was entitled Operation Juarez, largely because of the relationship of President Lincoln to Mexico during the time that Lincoln was president, with the idea that it was in the interest of the United States to accept and to sponsor such a reform, to assist these countries in the freedom to resume development of the type which they had desired. And this report was published in August of 1982, ironically, a few weeks before the eruption of the great Mexico debt crisis of 82, and was presented also to the U.S. government, the National Security Council, for the president's information at that time. There was some effort on the part of the president of Mexico to implement my proposal in the initial period of the debt crisis. He had at that time some support from the president of Brazil and the government of Argentina. Under pressure from the United States, the government of Brazil and Argentina capitulated, and President Jose Lopez Portillo, the president of Mexico, was left, shall we say, hanging out to dry. As a result, in October of 1982, he capitulated to the terms which were delivered to his government and people around him by people such as Henry A. Kissinger, who made a trip to Mexico at that time to attempt to intimidate the Mexicans to submitting to these new terms. We have, in my view, a system of injustice whose center is within the Department of Justice, especially the criminal division of the U.S. Department of Justice. The problem lies not with one administration or another, though one administration or another may act more positively or more negatively. You have permanent civil service employees. We have an out-of-control Justice Department, in my view, where the rot is not in the appointees as much as it is in the permanent bureaucracy. We have a permanent sickness in the permanent bureaucracy of part of our government. In my case, when the time came that somebody wanted me out of the way, they were able to rely upon that permanent injustice in the permanent bureaucracy of government to do the job. Always there's that agency inside the Justice Department which works for contract like a hitman when somebody with the right credentials and passwords walks in and says, we want to get this group of people or we want to get this person. My case may be, as Ramsey Clark described it, the most extensive and the highest level of these cases in terms of the duration and scope of the operation. So my case is important in the sense it's more extensive, it's more deep going, long going. But when it came to getting me, it was the same apparatus that I find, in my opinion, was used in these other cases. And that until we remove from our system of government a rotten, permanent bureaucracy which acts like contract assassins, using the authority of the justice system to perpetrate assassination, this country is not free, nor anyone in it.
But in what was as complex and pervasive a utilization of law enforcement, prosecution, media, and non-governmental organizations focused on destroying an enemy. This case must be number one. There are some where the government itself may have done more and more wrongfully over a period of time. But the very networking and combination of federal, state, and local agencies, of executive and even some legislative and judicial branches, of major media and minor local media, and of influential lobbyist types, the ADL preeminently. This case takes the prize. The purpose can only be seen as destroying. It's more than a political movement. It's more than a political figure. It is those two. But it's a fertile engine of ideas. A common purpose of thinking and studying and analyzing to solve problems, regardless of the impact on the status quo or on vested interests. It was a deliberate purpose to destroy that at any cost.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Dennis Small, I don't know if you want to say anything more on this, but I think this very much speaks to what we're talking about today.
No, I think we should proceed with our next speaker. I'm sure Ray has things to say we all want to hear.
Yes. Okay. So next we have Ray McGovern, who's a former CIA analyst and co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. He's a regular with the International Peace Coalition. And thank you again for joining us, Ray. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Scott, for leading us off so well. The notion that Scott and I and many of you swore one solemn oath and one solemn oath only to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that means something to Scott and to me. I want to thank Scott for making a very detailed account of what happened. You can see it today on Scott Ritter Extra. I read it on Consortium News. I do have one complaint about Scott, and that is that he writes faster than I can read. And he writes good, sensible stuff. Scott and I go back a ways, okay? I knew Scott by reputation when he was an inspector in Iraq, leading the inspection teams, which verified that there were no weapons of mass destruction there, okay? I've told a story about how Scott tried to get that word out before the attack on Iraq. But as we attacked Iraq, there was a British MP, his name was Michael Meacher. He had been a minister in a previous government. He invited Scott and me over to talk to his colleagues because he really thought that his colleagues were interested in the realities here about weapons of mass destruction and so forth. And so we went. We flew on the next flight and we tried to talk to his colleagues. They were not interested, okay? We tried real hard for several days. We couldn't get any appreciable listening or hearing from the MPs that Michael Meacher, perhaps naively, thought could be convinced by the facts. Now, why do I mention this? Because when we came home, we actually flew individually home. I was not detained or questioned, and neither, to my knowledge, was Scott. That was 2003. How far we have come just struck me as I thought through this. Now, I mentioned the oath to the Constitution, and this is more than just verbiage, okay? For those among you who are not Americans, or even for some Americans, perhaps this little review of our Constitution, how it was made, and how it was fortified by the Bill of Rights might be in order. Most people know that James Madison and George Mason constructed the Constitution with a lot of help from Jefferson and the other, but they were the main authors. Actually, Mason wrote most of it. George Mason used to live where I used to live in Arlington, Virginia. So what happened? Well, at the final, when they finally got a complete sign off by the other important people, Madison went to Mason and said, "We're all set to go, George. Thanks a lot for all the help. Let's go." And George Mason said, "Sorry, Jim, I can't sign this thing." And Madison says, "What do you mean, George? You wrote most of it, for God's sake. What's going on here?" And George Mason said, "I can't sign it because it doesn't have a Bill of Rights." Whoa. Doesn't have freedom of speech, freedom from illegal search and seizure. Now, in those days, there were gentlemen that kept promises, okay? And so Madison said to Mason, "Look, George, for God's sake, if people find out about this, that the Constitution, look, look, I promise you that I will get horsemen running up the eastern seaboard, right and left, and we'll get those Bill of Rights ratified and part of the Constitution. Could you please just keep quiet about this?" So Mason said, "All right." Men kept their promises, and in a few years, the Bill of Rights was ratified and became part of the Constitution. Now, freedom of speech, Scott already talked about, that's really very clear. There was another thing that the framers of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights felt really, really strongly about, and that was illegal search and seizure. When you're occupied by a colonist nation, as the United States was under British rule, your house can be raided, your possessions can be taken off, okay? They didn't want that to happen. And so the Fourth Amendment is probably, next to the first, the most important. It says, and if memory serves, let me see if I can repeat, the right of the people to be secure from illegal searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, except upon probable cause supported by oath or affidavit, and particularly describing the places to be searched or the people or things to be seized. Okay, end quote. Well, you know, you can persuade a magistrate up in upper New York State to sign anything if you're the FBI. That's what happened. That's what happened to Scott. So this Fourth Amendment is of equal importance to the First. It guarantees that our homes not be illegally searched or our things seized. And that's just one point that I wanted to make very clear. Russophobia. This is a really noxious thing. I know it as a boy when Senator McCarthy used it to ill intent and purpose. Now it's full-blown back. We can prove by documents, by court testimony, by email exchanges that in 2016, the Russophobia was raised by the Democratic Party, led by Barack Obama, who personally intervened to say that the Russians had hacked into the Democratic National Committee without any evidence at all, since disproven in court testimony by the cyber firm that was given the task by the FBI to look into Russian hacking. Aside here, I was out to lunch with two very, very well-educated friends yesterday, and I said, how many of you think the Russians hacked into the Democratic National Committee and are part responsible for Donald Trump? And they said, oh my God, those damn Russians? And of course they did. I will never. And I said, guess what? They didn't, okay? And why didn't you know that? Because of the sorry state of the media. And I referred them to an article I did about a week ago. It's called Decay, Decrepitude, Deceit in Journalism. And it starts out, Russiagate continues to survive like a science fiction monster, impervious to bullets, missiles, rockets, whatever. Why are they raising it again now? Well, be prepared, folks. They're raising it again now so that we can be very afraid of the Russians in case something really happens, really bad happens in Ukraine, and things are going down the drain in Ukraine as we speak. Now, let me just finish by injecting something from my discipline, my old profession of not only analyzing sophisticated or imagery or intercepts or agent reports, but open statements made by Soviet or Russian leaders. This one, my friends, is from yesterday. Why am I going to read an excerpt of it? Because you're not going to find it in the New York Times or the Washington Post. Is it important? I suggest you listen to it and see if you think it's important. It's done. It's written by Dmitry Trenin, who used to be head of Carnegie Moscow. In other words, well respected in U.S. circles, as in Western circles, as well as in Russian circles. With the troubles in Ukraine, he said, "I quit Carnegie. I'm going to try to inform my native Russian people what's really going on." This is what he wrote yesterday. Again, you won't see it anywhere else. I'll try to be very brief here. Here's a long article about how the Russians should react to what Scott and what Helga described as these new weaponry, these new things going on in Ukraine. And what Trenin says is, hopes are hopes, but it's clear that Russia has already exhausted its reserve of verbal warnings. The hostile actions of our adversaries do not call for condemnation. They call for an appropriate response. We're talking about airfields, including Poland, where F-16s handed over to Kiev may be based, possible attempts by Estonia and Finland to disrupt shipping in the Gulf of Finland, the prospect of Lithuania cutting the railway link between Kaliningrad and mainland Russia, significant threats to our ally Belarus, finishes up this way. A tough response at an early stage in the development of these possible schemes has a better chance of preventing dangerous escalation. A prompt response at an early stage, a tough response. Of course, the strongest position for Russia is to be proactive, to pursue a preventive strategy in which Moscow does not react to the enemy's escalatory steps, but takes the strategic initiative, period, end quote. That's new. Is Trennan important? He sure as hell is. He's one of the most respected advisors, not only to the academe there, but to the Kremlin, okay? So what he's saying here is we have to act first now. We can't be in the position of reacting all the time. A couple of months ago, Trennan wrote the first real hint that Russians were going to talk about non-strategic nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons, low-yield nuclear weapons, just to remind us that they have those things too. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that with negotiations off the table now, negotiations having been proposed by the Kremlin, it's all fair in love and war between now and the election in November. What's going to happen when those Ukrainian troops are all decimated, the ones that invaded Kursk? What's going to happen when the Russians have the free entry into Western Ukraine along the battle line that stretches for 1,000 kilometers? We don't know. But if Trennan is to be regarded, they're going to do preemptive things. They're not going to be reactive, okay? And I think we should fasten our seatbelts and realize that this is a reaction, a proactive reaction, what they see as a threat from people who don't know anything about war and are really afraid of losing an election. I talk about Tony Blinken. I talk about Jacob Sullivan. I talk about the president themselves. Neither one of the three served in the armed forces, wore a uniform since the Boy Scouts. So this is the danger here. Not only our constitution internally, but we're going to be faced with a Russia that has more aggressive, proactive reactions to what we do in Ukraine, also to what we might do against Iran. So hold on to your hats, folks. Read what Scott has written about his own personal situation. It's incredibly well written. As I say, he writes faster than I can read, but you can read it now on Consortium News or on his Extra. And thanks very much for letting me comment here. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ray. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask Helga Zepp-LaRouche, Scott Ritter, he's not able to stay on for the full meeting. So it'd be good, I think, to get a response and back and forth before Scott has to go. So Helga, if you have anything to respond, please go ahead.
Well, since both Scott and Ray, you both referred to the American Constitution as that where your loyalty is, I should report to you that when I founded the Schiller Institute in 1984, I was looking for an appropriate charter, and the document which I found most appropriate to express the ideas of the Schiller Institute was not the US Constitution, but the US Declaration of Independence, because it does express the most important concepts. And I just changed, I think, 6 or 7 words where it says that the US colony is occupied by the imperial power or some formulation like that. I changed it into the colonial occupation of the developing countries in any case, if you look at the charter of the Schiller Institute, it is almost identical to the Declaration of Independence, which is why, I think we are fighting really for this cause. Now, I think the danger to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and actually democracy, it's really rampant. The Fourth Amendment does not exist in that particular form in the German Grundgesetz, the German Constitution, but similar notions. But this is being eliminated right now. The Interior Minister is trying to put through a legislation which would allow authorities to secretly search apartments and electronic devices of citizens without even informing them. There are efforts to use AI and open source intelligence to, basically pursue people completely off any kind of personal freedoms and rights. And, I think that is a real danger to democracy in the so-called rules-based order, which seems to be going very far to suppress any opinion which is not the official NATO narrative. I think, the danger is incredible because the NATO narrative says there is no red line. See, we crossed so many red lines with Russia, and Putin never did anything. He just is bluffing. And I think that narrative is probably the most dangerous, because I think we are about to cross the line. We may be in the process. Ryabkov, the deputy foreign minister, said last Sunday, there are no circuit breakers anymore. Others have basically said the diplomatic option is completely off after the Kursk intervention. So I would not be surprised if we see some symmetrical or asymmetrical response fairly soon. And if then NATO remains in this escalation drive, I think we are in the most dangerous period between now and the election, and actually the new president, whoever it will be, coming in. So I can only say we have to escalate the efforts to unify the peace movement and fight off this danger. And I want to thank you very, very much, Scott and Ray.
Welcome.
Thank you. Scott, if you're still on and available, if you'd like to say anything before you go, that'd be great.
Well, again, Helga, thank you very much. Ray, you and everybody else you're going to have on is, we're all saying the same thing. We live in very dangerous times. We are, citizens of a country and of the world that we want to continue. We want humanity to thrive. And speaking out in defense of humanity has made us enemies of those who feed off of the terrorization of humanity. There is no greater terror in the world today than the threat of nuclear war. And we do have to come together. It's one of my eternal frustrations that the so-called peace movement has not been able to coalesce, to gel into a singularity capable of having its will imposed through the democratic process. These erstwhile peace activists actually end up doing more harm than good, because their infighting creates fractures that are exploited by those who wish that they don't succeed. I am putting something together on September 28th in Kingston, New York, together with Gerald Celente, a great American. And it is a rally for peace. We're also trying to turn into what I call Operation Dawn. Operation Dawn it's basically a challenge I put forward to the American people. What would you be willing to do to save democracy, to save America, to save the world by empowering your vote in November? We have an election coming up, and it just seems that most Americans have already given their vote away. I'm going to support this person. I'm going to support that person. But we have 80 days left to make them earn our vote. Earn our vote, not give the vote away, but earn our vote. And how do you make people earn your vote? By making issues paramount. And in the case of Operation Dawn, I'm going to make trying to prevent nuclear war the existential issue of this election, and see if I can get enough American citizens to say that we're not going to vote for a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or a Green. We're going to vote for the candidate who earns our vote by articulating a sound strategy on how they're going to prevent a nuclear war from occurring in the next months and years following this election. So that's my goal. Apparently, the FBI is fearful of this. The Justice Department doesn't want this to occur. And I'll just quote Admiral Farragut from the Civil War: damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And that's going to be my approach. Thank you again, Helga. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to participate.
Just before you go, sorry, one immediate question has come in that Dennis Speed wanted to make sure that you got, Scott.
Okay.
Go to that right now.
Sure.
Okay, great. Well, this is actually for you, Scott, but it's also for Ray and for Helga. Now, what has happened, I'm very glad you referenced your September 28th action, is that veterans have stepped up. Whether we're talking about Larry Wilkerson and Dennis Fritz of Eisenhower Media Network, Ray McGovern, Karen Kwiatkowski, you, Scott, Larry Johnson, Kirk Wiebe, Benny, that's where we have seen voices from the inside, in one sense, that have spoken up. Now, but we've also seen that there's a need to get people not only out on the street, not only with alternatives, but Helga referenced something, and I wanted to bring it up here about a council of reason. But that's important, is that you got to be able to find the flank in the mind of the enemy to fight back. And one of the things that's happened on our calls, and particularly there's other calls that have been happening that have spun off of the IPC call, and Dennis Fritz and Larry Wilkerson in particular have played a very important role with helping activists and others understand the nature of what it is we're trying to fight. But what's important is that we need something more. We're going to do the interventions. These are working. We see a lot of people are on today. They're getting a very important message. But I wanted you to say, given that you're really out there, your case has now become equivalent, as far as I'm concerned, and I think several of the rest of us, to the character of what happened around the Julian Assange case. It hasn't reached that kind of, reverberation yet because it's still new. And you're directly confronted with the reality of Ukraine, the reality of what you've been saying about these matters. And both you and Ray referenced this idea about the truth. So I'd like you to tell people, as you've already said, what's your view of what is needed? We've talked about an idea of a higher council, a group of people that really come together, no matter what their affiliations are, and they're going to deliberate. But what's your sense of what's really necessary, given your circumstance, the circumstance of everybody on the call? You're all on the CCD list. You were the one that made that, a real fighting case back in 2 years ago. So just like you to respond to that.
Well, the reason why I'm smiling is I'm the least political person you're ever going to meet in your life. I have no desire to run for higher office. I've never wanted to do that. I just wanted to serve my country as a simple servant, to do a simple job and trust. And there's the problem: to trust in the governed to do the right thing on behalf of the governing, to do the right thing on behalf of the governed, and to trust the governed to be discerning in selecting those who represent us in higher office, and to believe that everybody that called themselves an American embraced, you know, the one thing that unites us, which is the Constitution, the rule of law that defines this constitutional republic. What I've found is that we have been failed on both counts. The government has definitely failed us 100% across the board. And it's carrying out a frontal assault on the Constitution of the United States as we speak. I don't know what the outcome of this battle will be, but I can tell you this: they picked the wrong person. You see, I'm not a politician. I'm a Marine. And you know what Marines do when they're confronted with situations like this? We fix bayonets and we jam that damn rifle in the ground, and we turn to our fellow Marines and we say, we will fight and die on this hill. We will never retreat, never surrender. This is the battle of the lifetime because we are defending something greater than us. It goes back to the Chosin Reservoir when a Marine company commander did exactly that, told his company to die on this hill to keep the Chinese from cutting the bridge. That's the legacy I come from. The First Amendment is the battle that I am going to fight and die for if necessary. Hopefully it won't come to that, but this is how serious I take this. The Justice Department picked the wrong person, picked the wrong damn Marine. So I'm going to fight, but because I'm not a politician, I'm going to need help with people who are smarter than me about political affairs, because here's the difficult thing. The American people have failed collectively, 100% across the board. I'm writing an article right now, and my working title is American Zombies, because that's what the American people have become. We forget the absolute duty and responsibility inherent in the Constitution that's thrust upon us, we the people of the United States of America, who are supposed to be defending government of the people, by the people, for the people. But instead, we've punted to media, to special interests, to anything but ourselves. We look to others to solve problems for us. We let special interests fund our politicians and then wonder why our politicians don't represent we the people, but represent special interests. And we have allowed, we ignored the warning put forward by Dwight D. Eisenhower about the dangers of a military-industrial complex and what that will do to American democracy. So, and here's the thing I would caution people, because I take violent umbrage at the notion that disinformation and misinformation is a threat to democracy. Why? Because the moment you allow somebody to say, this is disinformation, this is misinformation, you allow them to silence those voices. You allow them to shape the debate. And it's the government right now that's saying, this is disinformation, this is misinformation. We want to silence these voices. I believe that the average American is capable of discerning fact-based truth. I believe that the average American is capable of listening to the dissonance of competing ideas and determining for his or herself which of those ideas they find to be more compelling. I believe that the best answer to disinformation and misinformation is better information. That rather to silence people, put out better information. And so when you when we come together in groups like this, I'm sometimes concerned that we come off as elitist ourselves, that we say we know best. We are empowered with the truth. We are empowered with knowledge and information, and therefore we are falling victim to the same hubris and intellectual narcissism that has infected our government. I think we have to find a better way, not just to come together and talk about these issues, but to empower the people to act on these issues, not by telling them what to do, but empowering them to receive the information and trusting in them to do the right thing with that information. And that, I think, is the eternal struggle. And oftentimes it's a missing link in what we do, is that we keep the people out of the picture because we believe that we are empowered with knowledge and insight. And maybe we are, but at the end of the day, if we keep the people out of it, then we're guilty of the same thing that the government is doing, which is saying, trust us, we know best, we'll make the decisions for you. So I think what you guys are doing, what we all are doing, is a great thing, but we got to get it down to the people. We got to find a way to get it in the hands of the people and then trust the people to do the right thing.
Thank you, Scott.
Right.
Just quickly, I wanted to ask Ray and Helga if they wanted to respond, and then Jack Gilroy, I know you have an announcement from Veterans for Peace. And then I also just wanted to say to Scott, we are happy to support this demonstration that you're holding on September 28th. We'd like to help you build for it. Yes, so please tell us how we can help you, in the very near future. We'd love to promote it and get it out. But why don't you go ahead, Ray and Helga, quickly, and then we'll go to Jack. Oh, you're muted, Ray. I see you're trying to speak.
Politics. My Irish grandmother said, don't get involved in politics. It's a dirty business. And she was, of course, completely right. But pursuing the truth necessarily makes you a target when politicians want to distort the truth. Let me just quote Julian Assange, quote, if wars can be started by lies, they can be ended by truth. So what we need to do is demask these attempts to portray Russia, Putin personally, as the new Nazis. They are not. What we need to do is pay attention to the information already available by sworn testimony, which gives the lie to Russiagate, which gives the lie to Russiagate. Now, when people ask me why I focus so much attention on exposing the lies of Russiagate, I finally said, well, because Russia has nuclear weapons. You got that? Well, I'm not sure they did get it. But people need to be disabused of the notion that Russia is the enemy. Now, what I would recommend is that we try to put a stake in the heart of the monster or the vampire of Russiagate on the 8th of August in Consortium News. Please take a look at that. It gives you a lot of ammunition. It's our latest attempt to expose these prostitutes who are spinning a different yarn. And in closing, I would cite the example of Aaron Bushnell. And for those of you from abroad that might not know that this is an Air Force airman who self-immolated before the Israeli embassy several months ago. Before he did this witness to what he had seen with respect to the genocide, and I use that term advisedly, in Gaza, this applies everywhere, to Ukraine as well. And what he said is this, in his Facebook thing, please listen. Many of us ask ourselves, what would we do? What would I do if I was alive during slavery or the Jim Crow South or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is, you're doing it right now. We're doing it, or we're not doing it right now. Let's do it.
Thank you, Ray. It's very true. Helga, would you like to say anything before we continue?
Very briefly, both you, Ray, and Scott, you have pointed to the fact that Germany could be the country which could stop this if the citizens would have the courage to oppose these policies. And, Scholz declared after the NATO summit that the United States made the decision to put medium-range missiles into Germany. Now, if that is happening, it will make Germany the launching pad, the battlefield, and the nuclear grave because there will be nothing left if it ever comes to a nuclear war of Germany. And I want to invite both of you to keep helping me to wake up the German people. Both of you have done that. Scott, you in particular made a very nice video by attacking the German Michel, has put all the kepi over his head and eyes and ears, because if the Germans would wake up, it would really make a difference. And just now, you said that in the context of the Nord Stream pipeline. Just now, the Wall Street Journal reported that, Zelensky was the one who gave the order, or he knew about it. And the German former D.C.and CIA kind of chief said, oh no, this is now a Russian false flag, because they are perfect masters in making false flags about some. So I would like to ask both of you, keep helping me to bring light on that matter, because a lot depends on it.
Thank you, Helga. So with that, I know that Ray or Jack, you have to get going, but you had an important announcement from Veterans for Peace. Go ahead, please.
I'd like to support Scott right away by saying I plan to be in Kingston on the 28th, and I'll do whatever I can to try to get others to go there as well. But the whole question about defense is that we keep talking about the United States Defense Department, and everyone on this group, pretty much knows that that's a lie, that it's not defense. And so our focus with Veterans for Peace will be to expose the fact that we are talking about the Department of War. And we have come up very recently with a pledge that we hope that young people, and we'll have students on our workshop on Sunday at 12 noon, Veterans for Peace National Convention. We'll have university students, some who have been involved in the spring uprisings, with us. And they have already said that they approve of our pledge. And our pledge has been taken really from the Center on Conscience and War. But instead of a military pledge, it's a pledge not to interview or to ever work for a war, supposedly defense, a war company. Now we're going over I'm going over the Binghamton University right now, which is pretty much like many universities in the United States, an incubator for the war industry. And we will have signs there notifying parents coming in today with their students and the students themselves that they are coming into an area where the greatest terrorist group in the manufacturer in the world is located, one of 390 places, Lockheed Martin. We have a big banner that Lockheed Martin is a terrorist corporation, and BAE, the largest in Europe, sixth largest, is a terrorist corporation. They're on campus very often recruiting. So we're going to be asking students to please take this oath. Take this as an oath, as Scott Ritter and others took an oath to go in to defend the United States. And that pretty much, that whole militarism thing has been proven over the years as pretty much a total lie. We have not had any so-called invasion of this country since 1814, when those two poor British soldiers came off and were used as fodder in New Orleans. But the people who, of course, have been making money on this is like the Krupps of Germany. These are the multiple individuals in the United States who want permanent war. So we'll be there with the students. But if you can at all, find time at 12 noon on Sunday. In the chat, Anastasia already put it, is the link that will take you to our event. And there you will find Terry Lodge, who will explain his letter, which is a genocide prosecution letter, where we hope that in coming years, it's going to take some time, that these CEOs and others will be where the Krupps and others did go or should have gone after Nuremberg, and that is that they will be in jail or prison. We believe that this is going to happen. So this will be the letter to be delivered by Veterans for Peace organizations, and we're trying to tie it in with students as well. Follow the young. And we are trying to work with students to try to bring together this particular point. So that's about it. I'm going now to just one. I wish that this was done throughout the United States as students come back to school, to remind the kids, remind the students and the families, please don't even interview and protest when they do come into your campus, and to take the pledge to not interview and not to ever work for a war company. Thank you very much, Anastasia, and everyone.
Thank you very much, Jack Gilroy. I'm sure many people are looking forward to joining you there. Okay, so we're going to continue with our agenda. I apologize for the lateness in time, but perhaps we can continue going over a little bit past our 2-hour mark for the discussion today. Next, I'd like to ask Professor Henry Baldelomar. I apologize if I butcher your name. He is the charge d'affaires of the Bolivian Embassy in Washington, D.C. So thank you so much for joining us today, Your Excellency.
Okay, as I was saying, last year, towards mid-year, Bolivia has requested to become a member of the BRICS group in a very complex scenario as we are presently going through in the world, a threat situation which could harm the hopes for peace that the peoples of the world desire so as to reach a level of development. The purpose of participating in the BRICS group may well be can be based on the Bolivian constitution approved in 2009, which establishes a commitment to peace. Peace is a fundamental principle that is in the political constitution of the multinational, plurinational country of Bolivia, and it mandates the peaceful solution of all conflicts and the promotion of a culture of peace. In its preamble and its fundamental principles, the Bolivian constitution sets out Bolivia to be a peaceful and pacifist country, promoting peace, solidarity, and justice, both within our boundaries as well as in our relations with other countries. The culture of peace is also included in the Bolivian political constitution, which we promote the culture of peace as a fundamental value of the nation, and it includes an encouragement of tolerance, dialogue, and peaceful solution of conflicts, both internally as well as internationally. Foreign policy, Bolivian foreign policy is committed to non-interventionism in national issues, peaceful cooperation, and rejection of war as a means of conflict resolution. These principles are an integral part of what the Bolivian state calls the diplomacy of peoples, and makes it very clear that it is constitutionally a pacifist state. So these elements I have just described are the basis and the foundation on which Bolivia chooses to join the BRICS. Let us recall that at the end of the Cold War, the international system has been going through transitions after efforts by the United States to establish a unipolar order after the attack on September 11, 2001. Over these years since, we have seen the emergence of the member countries of the BRICS, and this initiative to establish a new world multipolar system dovetails with our principles, the commitment to peace that is incorporated into our constitution. No doubt, Bolivia's participation in the BRICS also responds to a political and strategic and economic priority. This allows Bolivia to make use of economic opportunities to trade with other states through a new credit system. Over recent years, particularly in the last century, the source of financing from the International Monetary Fund and the other Bretton Woods institutions have led to a state of dependency that tied us to economic measures which, instead of generating development and social justice, have accentuated social asymmetry. So it is indispensable for the global South, particularly Bolivia, to access other sources of credit, but also attain the ability to access the market of the BRICS group, which brings together 40% of the world's population and 56% of the world's global production. So access to these markets is undoubtedly a great opportunity for Bolivia, and also the opportunities given by the new development bank to finance infrastructure development projects. Of course, also, Bolivia's membership in BRICS hopes to strengthen new alliances rather than the old alliance with the United States and Europe. Bolivia wishes to diversify its international relations and break free from the market dependency on the United States and Europe and strengthen our ties to the emerging economies. The Bolivian initiative also looks to drive technological cooperation. Bolivia is part of the lithium triangle we see in South America, which is made up of Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia. These three countries have among them the greatest reserve in the world of lithium, which is of the utmost importance for energy technology, particularly. Bolivia is one of the countries with the greatest amount of reserves. In Salar de Uyuni, we see there is the greatest lithium deposits in the triangle, and our new associations will allow us to introduce new technology to the processing of lithium as well as iron. Bolivia has traditionally been an exporter of raw materials, but the new orientation that President Luis Arce Catacora has taken is Bolivia a qualitative leap ahead. In strategic terms, Bolivia wishes to be a part of the creation of a new world order that responds to the goal that has been often repeated in various international fora, a multipolar international order. And Bolivia will be part of a structure in which it will not be a mere observer of decisions taken in the past by the great powers, but will be a contributing component of the building of this order of peace and risk mitigation and getting rid of these dangers to the population of the world. Cooperation then and integration are the key motivations that Bolivia has leaned on, in which Bolivia joins the international group of BRICS countries, which are the group of countries which we can collaborate in this construction of a world order that protect us from acts of violence and protect and the attacks on national sovereignty. We hold the hopes that this diversity of natural resources we have in Bolivia will also be made use of within this industrialization and global development project by the other countries making part of this effort. We want to be not only a country that contributes to the West, but the world community has to be made up not only of the West, but of all the peoples and all the nations in this concert of nations that makes up the world today. Now, finally, to end my brief presentation, our participation in the BRICS and in the new international configuration in favor of the expectations of the global South, we also aspire to access to new means of financing to see our way through this transformation. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you very much for listening to me. I think that when one tries to challenge the ongoing narrative that you hear from the mainstream media, you run into problems, and least of them is the technical problems that we are facing right now. I want to thank you for listening to me, and I want to thank everybody who is on this call. Clearly a very important group of people throughout the world who are genuinely interested in peace and who are genuinely concerned about what is happening, not only in this country, in the United States, but in the world generally. Yes, there are powerful forces that don't have human interests in mind, and that benefit from ongoing fighting and ongoing destruction and ongoing suffering. In my limited time, I wanted to make one central point, if I may. I was listening to the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations actually claiming this is the most moral country in the world. In light of an ongoing genocide where everybody can see in real time bombing of hospitals and schools, killing of civilians in a massive way. I mean, one bomb which killed 100 people where there wasn't any identifiable bodies left, but only collections of kilograms of human flesh, where there is open discussion about rape of prisoners, whether that should be justified or not when it's actually taking place. And in light of all this, somebody can claim to be moral, in fact, the most moral country in the world. And then I've been thinking about it. How is such a thing possible? And the only answer I could come up with is it is the absence of international law. It's the absence of objective criteria and principles and rules that should apply to friend and foe alike. The importance of the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the Geneva Conventions, the principles that should govern the behavior of states are so important, particularly when there are countries involved that have nuclear weapons and that are willing to use them and that are totally oblivious to the dangers of expanding conflicts, spinning out of control, and that are just interested in continuing killing and interested in pursuing their own personal or national goals without any respect for the rights of others. So the one point that I wanted to make here, not as a Palestinian only, not as a human rights attorney only, but as a person who's concerned about the world that we live in, who's concerned about world peace, and who sees the future of humanity, the human race, depending on our working very hard to challenge the forces that are interested just in private gain and making money off of the suffering of others. And to say, look, we have to have international law. We have to have universal principles that apply to friend and foe alike. We have to work very hard, each within their own country or their own environment, to work towards a future for all mankind. This is my plea to you on the anniversary of the Geneva Convention, 75 years to that, on the situation where international law is an absolute essential for safeguarding the lives of humans. We absolutely need to work together for justice, and we need to be willing to stand up and challenge the prevailing forces and the prevailing narratives that are leading us towards destruction. This is the main point that I wanted to bring. There is an ongoing genocide against our people that is taking place in real time. The United States, unfortunately, is lending its support not only to the ongoing genocide, but in the impunity of those who are carrying it out, and of preventing international law from being applied to put an end to this ongoing outrage.